Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We've been having a bit of a think, Beth and I, the producer and I, about see, the problem we've got at the moment is, I feel, I don't know whether she agrees with me or not, but she certainly pretends to. I feel that we should start trying to do some stuff, particularly, I suspect, Brexit stuff, in a less confrontational way. And then, of course, the fellas whose livelihoods depend upon the number of clicks that my clips get, they get very spooked by that thought, because it is generally the sort of slightly more confrontational or combative encounters. Maybe that's not true so much anymore, but people still get very, very angry when the fellow who is on their side of the argument turns out to have voted to leave the European Union because he doesn't really understand Hoover-based or vacuum cleaner-based legislation, that kind of thing. But I also enjoy the toing and froing. But I think if I said pantomime politics, you'd understand more what I meant. Surely we can all agree that there is not a divide down the middle of the country on which your attitude to every issue is going to be determined. And yet it does begin to feel a bit like that when you look at a story today, like the Formula One grid girls, as you can't do quote marks on the radio, but that is the term used to describe the women, often quite scantily clad, who just sort of drape themselves around Formula One. Often get showered in champagne by the victorious drivers. And the company that owns Formula One, the company that runs Formula One, has decided that they don't want to do this anymore. And I don't know whether you're going to laugh at me now, but why is this such a big deal? Have you stopped to think about that? Whether or not you're raging on one side or the other, and I've kind of had a mini rage. Actually, I haven't had a rage at all today. Social media's full of it, as I'm sure most of you will know. But why is this such a big deal? A company has made a decision about how it wants to present itself to the world. Now, it can, of course it can, and you don't even have to check the Daily Mail to know that one of their very highly paid female columnists will be, in her own mind, defending the right of women to get sprayed in the face with champagne while wearing bikinis in return for money, and somehow question my suspicion that most people in a truly fair society, if you gave them the choice at the age of 10 of what their dream would be, if they love Formula One, would you dream of being a driver, or would you dream of getting paid to have champagne sprayed in your face while you're wearing your swimming costume? They'd probably go for being a driver, if you were a fan. I don't think that's... Do you see what I mean? I don't think that's controversial. But the story is the latest bonfire around which you have to dance after picking a side. I may be overthinking stuff a bit today, but I'd love to do the why as well as the what on this. Why is this such a controversial story? Or a potentially infuriating decision? It seems to me to be just a little bit anachronistic, the darts and the Formula One. I don't know if you've ever tried to explain to an 11-year-old girl what's going on in the darts when these usually overweight, pastry-faced men, and I love darts, by the way, and I'm overweight and pastry-faced. Well, I'm not that overweight, but I'm pastry-faced, so I know all the pot kettle black stuff. But if you've ever tried to explain to a young woman on the cusp of maturity, on the cusp of adolescence, what's going on at the darts in particular, because I watch quite a lot of darts, I don't really watch Formula One, it's really very difficult. And this isn't me being militant or opening up my Jermaine Greer fan club or whatever it may be. It's the viciousness, isn't it, and the verbal violence that accompanies almost every story that involves any form of change. And so the reason I was pontificating a moment ago was because I don't know whether it's going to work. I mean, this is a commercial organisation. We kind of have to light the blue touch paper sometimes, because, as we've said a billion times on the programme, you sell a hell of a lot more tickets for the ghost train, i.e. trying to frighten people or trying to enrage them, than you do for the speak your weight machine, which just calmly tells you how much you weigh. It's a miracle anyone pays for that, to be frank. But I don't get quite, and I had to take a step back to realise this. And the best step back I've ever found when it comes to sexual equality or social change in the context of how women and men are perceived, it's from a 1967 poster that I've told you about quite a few times on the show. But I am always shocked when I rediscover it, because I can't quite believe that this was normal in 1967. This is a brilliant film, The Taming of the Shrew, featuring Elizabeth Burton. Well, she was actually, wasn't she? She was married to him at the time. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And they also produced it, so all of these decisions would have been green-lighted by Elizabeth Taylor herself. It's a film of the play, of course, the Shakespeare play. And this is the catchline. I don't know if you know Cecil Court in Covent Garden. It's been quite a London-centric show today, but if you don't live in London and you visit, you should always check out Cecil Court. Tell the kids that it's Diagon Alley out of Harry Potter. It's like an old-fashioned Victorian lampposts and full of bookshops and memorabilia shops and great map shops, and it's really lovely, actually. Small independent traders smack in the middle of London selling really, really cool stuff. Quite a lot of military memorabilia. But there's a cinema poster shop or a cinema memorabilia shop, and I did a comedy double take about 5 years ago when I walked past. I love Richard Burton. I have a huge soft spot for him, a tragic but heroic in many ways figure. And I couldn't actually believe my eyes when I read this. A motion picture for every man who ever gave the back of his hand to his beloved, and for every woman who deserved it, which takes in a lot of people! ! And the reason I mention that today is because even if you can find lots of women who say that they will feel, I don't know what the word would be, or that say that they are unhappy about Formula One deciding that it doesn't want grid girls anymore. Here in 1967, you have a mainstream cinema release working on the presumption that most women are cool with being victims of domestic abuse. The argument that somehow the woman deserved it. That was normal in 1967, and women went along with it. But then I then get accused, and that's all grist to the mill. But just for your reference of traditionalist paternalism or something, because instead of saying to you, what would you rather dream of, I chose on social media this morning to say, are there really lots of parents out there who would rather their child dreamt of being sprayed with champagne while wearing their swimming costume than being a racing driver? And I got a text off Mrs. O'Brien saying you're being a bit old-fashioned on Twitter this morning, so that always gives me pause. Shouldn't perhaps have seen it from the parental point of view. Should have just seen it from the child's point of view. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to wear a bikini at the motor racing, Daddy, and get sprayed with champagne by the men who've won. Really? Okay, John. It's an interesting ambition. Sadly, as a bloke, you can't do that. Do you see what I mean? And then we'll find out at 10 minutes to 11. We'll find out whether or not this works. You know what I'm saying, really, don't you? Can we have a conversation about this that's quite informed and sensible? Or do we have to get really cross with each other? It's a tough one, because I need you to call me if you're cross. And then we'll work out why you're cross. And then we'll work out whether you should be. So why do you think, regardless of what your personal opinion on the story is, why do you think this story lends itself to such an argy-bargy when that 1967 example that I've just given you proves that a society's accommodation of differences between the sexes moves incredibly quickly sometimes in very short amount of time. It was a centenary yesterday of women over 30 who passed various criteria of property ownership and assets being allowed to vote for the first time in the United Kingdom. That was only 100 years ago. Go to 1967, and it's perfectly acceptable to promote a Hollywood film by joking about how many women deserve to be knocked about by their men. Genuinely, I'm not making this up, it's just there. So I look at that and think, crikey, we've made some progress. And then a company decides, do you know what, I think probably the world's moved on a bit. It's certainly moved on from the days when you could release a major Hollywood film with a joke about how many women deserve to be beaten by their husbands. We've moved on from then. So Formula One have decided we've probably moved on from the days when it seemed a woman's value within society was determined by how she looked in a bikini. So I like looking at women in bikinis. I'm not going to be po-faced or puritanical or anything like that. I don't understand what people's problem is with Formula One's decision to just say, well, this isn't really what we're trying to promote anymore. But the fear I have when I talk to you about not wanting it to be a polarised pantomime, genuinely, and I don't really want you to tell anyone else this, just keep it between us, I just worry that sometimes radio's more popular when it's punchy. Let's find out, shall we? 0345 6060 973. I'd tell you what I would take your advice on as well. Would you explain to a 12-year-old girl why those sort of flabby old men playing darts are accompanied into the arena by women in spangly bikinis? Just explain why. Why? 0345 6060 973. Start with Petra, who's in Mortlake. Petra, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me on. I wanted to talk from first-hand experience of sex discrimination, which I had never experienced until I entered an environment that was predominantly men, but it's not that should have been the problem, because I trained in an environment that was predominantly men and I never suffered discrimination whatsoever. It is entirely down to attitudes that still remain in sport, that are governed by a particular group of people who still refuse to see women as equals. And this is fundamentally what is still driving discrimination of women in sport, all across sport. Even when there are women visible, discrimination and bullying and harassment is still happening. It is not simply a case of, oh, look, there's women. It's about the way we are still treated. And in sports where there are none at all, the barrier is, the obstacle is far bigger. So in Formula One, in motorcycle racing, in golf, although there are women in golf, clearly, snooker. I've watched snooker my whole life.
Yes.
You know, I play pool. I'm quite good at it.
Where are we going with this, Petra? I recognise a lot of what you're saying, and I'm unsurprised by most of it. But of course, the response is, who are you or who are we to tell these women who apparently enjoy draping themselves over Formula One that they shouldn't be able to anymore? Because
it's fundamental. Because this is gonna be controversial to those people, and people are saying, stop telling women what they can and cannot do. It's not about that. It's undermining women's efforts to get away from being looked at in this way.
The bit where I would be a little bit wary of getting all my ducks in a row would be speaking to someone who's done it. And there'll be various different opinions, just like at that dreadful President's Club dinner at Claridge's or the Dorchester the other week. There was some claims that some women enjoyed it or were quite happy to put up with it as long as the cheque was big enough. You'll find the same here. I've heard from a couple of women today who've done it and found it absolutely disgusting. And there's a couple of women giving interviews who've done it and find it's fine. I think, and I'm trying to get inside the head of angry people, which is always fun. I think they're angry about the suggestion that well, no, because if they're angry about the suggestion that these women have been told they can't do it, then they should have been angry about the suggestion that these women were told they can't do it unless they dress in a specific way. So where are we going? What exactly is achieved by telling these women that they're going to have fewer choices in future?
I don't think they're going to have fewer choices.
Well, they are, because this choice is gone.
No, because then you actually have to start addressing why women can't be involved in any other way.
Yes. And that is, so there's a price you pay. I'm going to use a really spurious analogy simply because I'm just feeling a bit mischievous. So when we stopped sending children up chimneys, there were strong arguments saying this is awful, they'll starve, that, you know, these children they're going up chimneys. But the children had to suffer, if you like, the impecunity of no longer being paid to go up chimneys. There's always going to be victims at the vanguard who, if you're changing the status quo, the people who were currently comfortable with the status quo are always going to get hurt. And in this case, it's going to be the promo girls who currently earn a few quid doing this. They have to suck it up for the greater good, is what you're saying.
Well,
You are?
I have a very big problem with people seemingly thinking that these women do not spend a lot of time doing this job. It is it's
No, but that's, you're splitting hairs. I just, because you know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand the spluttering outrage from what we could loosely describe the other side, and you're the lens through which I'm examining it. You are saying, even if it is only a couple of weekends' work a year, even if it is only a few quid, it's part of a career progression as well. We should recognise that. But you are saying to them, sorry, girls, you're going to have to suck this one up for the greater good. And the greater good is changing society to place greater value on women for things other than their boobs.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, OK, I'm just checking. And I get that, but I also get that if it was me and my boobs that were being sacrificed upon the altar of social progress, I'd feel a little bit aggrieved. 10:58 is the time. So you can do it with a modicum of calmness and sense, but I don't want to alienate really stupid, furious people. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you're really stupid and furious about this, or if you're really clever and furious as well. I'm being facetious. It's coming up to 10:59. I don't know what else we're going to do today, because we've got Mystery Hour coming up at 12. There are quite a few stories around that I'm intrigued by. I will probably wait until tomorrow to look at this 34-year peak in anti-Semitism, because it's not a subject that I feel should be sort of squeezed into relatively small slots, and it's a subject upon which I feel myself changing daily. My understanding of, what would you describe it as? I met a Jewish businessman at an event recently, and he'd heard me explain why my position on this had changed, and he came up and gave me a hug and was talking about how you finally get it, and I do. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the conversation I want to have about a 34-year spike in anti-Semitism is going to be comfortable listening for anybody. So we'll probably save that until tomorrow. We'll carry on with this Formula One conversation for now. And then, just up my sleeve, I am sort of drawn to the tale of a mum who's announced her children's birthday party, but told all the parents of the children who were invited that they're going to have to pay £6 for their children to attend. That is a bit of a hand grenade in the context of playground politics. We'll crack on with the Formula One stuff for the time being, though, because I do find it genuinely fascinating. If you think it's somehow an assault upon our freedoms to ban these women, can you call me and tell me why? While the practice of employing grid girls has been a staple of Formula One for decades, we feel this custom does not resonate with our brand values and clearly is at odds with modern-day societal norms. We don't believe the practice is appropriate or relevant to Formula One and its fans, old and new, across the world. Thus spake Liberty Media, the owners, I think, of Formula One. That was a quote from the managing director of commercial operations at Formula One. And, you know, just in the context of the words I just read to you, it's fairly unremarkable, isn't it? And yet, everyone involved must have known it would ignite the blue touch paper of public outrage on both sides. I'm on the side of not doing it anymore, but it's not a bridge I die on, you see, because I keep thinking back to that 1967 poster, effectively, two of the most famous people on the planet, effectively promoting domestic violence in an advert for taming of the shrew. If you missed that, I'll read it out again. But that's what it was doing. You'd take my word for it for the time being. And now we would look back on that and find it ridiculous. I think 67, 30, 41, in 42 years' time, no, it's more than that. It's in 50 years' time, 51 years' time, we'll look back on particularly the darts. I've got to tell you, I'm not massively au fait with Formula One. It's all a bit repetitious. But anyway, I don't want to have that argument. Particularly the darts. I find it almost impossible to explain to a young, modern woman why the chubby fellas coming into lob arrows at a corkboard are accompanied by women in gold lame bikinis. It's just hard to explain. And the reason why it's hard to explain is that we don't live in the world anymore where it was normal. Any more than we live in the world where Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor would promote a film by effectively encouraging men to beat up their wives. That's it, isn't it? We're just moving. And yet, it may be more complicated than that, because I don't want to typify everybody on the other side as just saying, well, yeah, that's all right, you're still stuck in 1967. That's fine. But the rest of the sport isn't. The rest of the sport is moving on. Don't take it so personally. Your enjoyment of watching Lewis Hamilton win his 4th world title was not enhanced in any way by the sight of women in slinky frocks holding umbrellas. or getting sprayed with champagne. Well, maybe it was. That could be the thing. That could be the thing to break this one wide open. How is your enjoyment of watching men drive very fast improved by very attractive young women in slinky frocks carrying umbrellas around? It's your starter for 10. John's in Le Mans, which is appropriate enough, given that city's association with motor racing. John, what would you like to say?
Well, James, your opinion seems to be based on inaccurate facts.
Wouldn't be the first time, John. Please feel free to enlighten me.
I listen to you every day, so I wouldn't disagree with you on that. Good girls today have moved on. You're talking about bikinis. That goes back to the 70s. The majority of the countries that host a Grand Prix today and have the girls to do promotional work are dressed in the traditional dress of that country. That's dresses, not bikinis.
Or slinky frocks. Can we agree on that, or shall I just drop the slinky for the sake?
Slinky, yes, slinky was, but as I say, it's moved on, and people have.
Right, no, I happily accept that, but I mean, bikinis was a figure of speech. Let me just read you again what the director of Formula One commercial operations said. We feel this custom does not resonate with our brand values and clearly is at odds with modern-day societal norms. We don't believe the practice is appropriate or relevant to Formula One and its fans, old and new. You clearly think it is, so tell me why.
I read that statement the day it was published on their website. Let's just finish one other thing. The girls do not get sprayed with champagne.
Well, I've seen that happen.
There's only two. Yes, once in the last few years, Lewis Hamilton made a big mistake, and that's why it got so much publicity. He did spray a girl on a podium, and it caught her in the face. Since then...
Well, no, they all get sprayed.
They don't.
Everyone gets sprayed. The other drivers get sprayed. The crowd gets sprayed. You can't be near a podium without getting sprayed. But I suspect we're splitting hairs a bit here.
No, we're not splitting hairs. We're talking facts.
Okay. No, I'm happy to be schooled on how champagne gets sprayed at Formula One podium.
Do not pick up their bottles until the VIPs who presented the awards get ushered very rapidly off the podium, taking the two grid girls that are on the podium with them.
Okay, so they don't get sprayed with champagne and they don't wear bikinis, but that obviously is me not knowing a lot about Formula One. Right. You'll concede that the managing director of commercial operations at Formula One knows a lot about Formula One, I presume.
Well, he does now, but he's only been doing it for about 15 months. So
when he says over the last year or 15 months, we have looked at a number of areas which we felt needed updating. So, and remember, we're trying to do this in a slightly calmer way than everybody else is managing to at the moment. You disagree that any updating is needed?
Let us look at what's caused this. It started with the darts, and immediately Barry Hearn, the promoter, turned around and said, I don't agree with it, but I have no say in the matter. It is three television companies, Sky, BBC and ITV, who have forced this upon us. So that is why he's doing it, because the television contract holders have insisted.
OK, but then why have they done that, do you think?
I think Liberty followed very rapidly, because Liberty, don't forget, is an American company. Mr. Bratch and his fellow directors are Americans, and they are looking over their shoulder at their home country, America, where we see a great deal of pressure, particularly with this #MeToo campaign by some very, very outspoken and very pushy ladies who are.
No, let's just back up a bit, because I don't want you to get sort of a bit pilloried for unfair reasons. Pushy ladies or victims of sex abuse. You can describe them either way round. But let me look at this from a different angle, John. Why does it? I mean, are you genuinely going to enjoy the next race less?
Obviously not. But
so then why then does... No, I want to learn from you, I really do. Why? Because I already have, I want to learn more. Why does it matter to you then? If it's not going to in any way affect your enjoyment of the sport, why does it matter to you? Well, take a moment to answer that if you want, because I think it's probably more than Formula One, isn't it? It matters to you because it feels as if...
hang on, let's look at two things.
Yes.
One from Formula One.
Well, no, you. I'm very interested in you personally, because you've just said it's not going to affect your enjoyment of the sport one iota, which makes it confusing to me that you care.
I care because I worked in the sport for many years.
Yes.
I see no reason to change something which is not causing offence to the majority, it would appear, from what we're seeing on social media, of our fans.
Well, you don't want to take social media as an exercise in democracy. It's generally an exercise in who's angrier and who's more old-fashioned. But we're talking about you.
But unfortunately, you're wrong there, James, in that social media has become such an influence on our lives.
But John, if you looked at my feed, you'd think it was causing massive outrage and loads of people were really pleased about it. And if you looked at, I don't know, sort of some person who was at the President's Club dinner, their feed would probably be the opposite. But that's why I want to talk specifically to and about you.
In that case, go and look at the feeds from the websites that are specific to motorsport and Formula One, and the fans are the ones who are saying.
And that's why I'm so confused, because you've just said yourself that it's not going to affect in any way, shape, or form your enjoyment of the sport. So why does it matter to you? I think I know. Can I possibly make a suggestion? You can tell me if I'm reading it right or not.
You can.
Do you feel as if you're being implicitly insulted? It's as if they're saying this thing that you have gone along with for years and never found remotely troubling, now you're being told that it's sexually exploitative and discriminatory, and you jolly well don't like being lumped in with those sort of accusations for the alleged apparent crime of turning up at a race where there are women in dresses and traditional clothes and not getting sprayed with champagne, but generally there to adorn the event. It feels as if someone's judging you, and that would bridle with me, and it sounds like it bridles a bit with you.
I find the whole subject at the moment, many subjects at the moment are being affected by the death of something very important in the world, which is common sense. Common sense and political correctness are destroying so many things at the moment. Now,
John, we're talking about a decision by a commercial operation to do away with something that feels a little bit old-fashioned. It's not really political correctness or common sense.
But then why is that company telling us every day that the people who they are most concerned about are the fans?
I don't think we're going to make any progress here, because I can't understand why you care. And my problem is I don't really care. I just couldn't really make a good job of explaining to a 12-year-old girl why they're there. Why are they there? I don't know why they're there. They're because they look nice, aren't they? We can agree on. Let's find things we can agree on. So why are they there, John?
Why am I saying what I'm saying? Why did I call you? Because I wanted to point out to you straight away that your basic premise was totally incorrect.
Well, I'm happy to accept that. I always am. So now we're looking at why you care. So let's start with this. Why are they there?
No, forget why are they there.
It's kind of intrinsic to the entire conversation about whether they should be, isn't it, John? So why do you think they're there?
I don't think. I know they are there because they are there because they were, before the statement that was made this week by Liberty, they seemed to be an intrinsic part of the show. They were not.
But why are they an intrinsic part of the show? I'm not trying to trip you up or anything. I want to know why they're there. If I had to explain it to a young woman in particular, or a young boy, why are they there, John?
I can only answer that one by saying, like many other sports and many other activities, it has become a tradition and a part of the show.
So why do you want them to stay there, even though you've said it won't affect your enjoyment of the show in any way, shape? I don't think that's true. I think you do like looking at them, don't you?
Why do you want them to go?
I don't have a strong view one way or the other. I'm trying to understand why they're there.
I think why are they there?
Yes, John.
I'll repeat what I said.
No, I know what you said the last time. It's not an answer to because there's loads of traditions. It used to be traditional to send kids up chimneys, but we wouldn't defend that on the grounds that we always did it. Otherwise, you'd end up being an apologist for everything from slavery to women not having the vote. So I know it went on in the past, and it looks like it's not going to go on in the future. So let's focus on the present. The last race you went to, why were they there?
Why were they there? As I said to you, and I'll repeat again...
Oh, John, you can do better than this, mate. It's not a trick question. Why are they there? What is the rationale for them being there? You can't have a rationale that just says they always were. Why are they there, John?
It is a development. They're there because it's been developed out of the original They weren't grid girls. They were promotional girls for large corporations, mainly those selling cigarettes. And that is when you did see them rushing around in bikinis. You did see a lot of...
Well, that's not why they're there now, then, is it?
It grew into a point where it actually grew out of America, where there were grid girls and...
Why were they there?
Cheerleaders. You'll have to ask the past.
Well, I'm asking you, because you're defending it without knowing why it exists.
I can't. Okay. Sorry, you are...
Let's not do this, John. Let's not. No, you're better than this, John. Don't start making it about me. We're talking really simply about why are they there?
Why are they there? You're also making it very difficult for me because I'm trying to explain to you what it's grown out of, and you're saying forget the past. Well, unfortunately, many things are based on the past, and they are progressions.
I completely agree with you, and that is what progress means. It's recognising that things in the past should probably be changed. I will ask you once more, and I'm sorry that you feel that this is an unfair question, but I'm only asking it again and again because I'm fascinated to hear the answer. Why are they there?
Why is the Earth round?
Okay, John.
Sorry, you cannot ask me to tell you what was in the mind of the management who were organising...
I just want your reason in your own head, because I think I know why they're there. I think they're there to sort of titillate sad old men.
Well, then maybe you're a sad old man. I don't...
Maybe, but at least I've got an answer to the question. Why do you think they're there?
Well, I don't think they're there to titillate sad old men.
Well, that's a no, so it's not that. We can cross that off the list. What are we going to put on the list instead?
So why shouldn't you add a bit of glamour to a sporting event?
So it is to titillate sad old men?
No, because sad old men are not...
So they're there to add glamour to a sporting event?
Yes.
Okay.
Of which many other...
No, that's fine. I got it. It wasn't difficult. It's like pulling teeth with you, John. They're there to add glamour to a sporting event, but just to clarify, your enjoyment of that sporting event is not going to be in any way diminished when they're not there. You did say that earlier, right?
I didn't say... No.
Oh, okay. Misheard.
You asked me enjoyment. I will still continue to watch the events.
But you'll enjoy it a bit less?
Not necessarily.
So you won't enjoy it less?
No.
Well, then we're all fine, John. Oh, strange process. It's weird, and I feel like it's taking form in the fog somehow, and in the next few months we're going to actually nail it down. But this notion of offence and outrage, there's a couple of stories this week that played very hard into it. There's a handful of students that had a hissy fit in a cafe that had some sort of wartime theme because they felt that it was endorsing or promoting colonialism, which, with the greatest of love and respect to revolting students up and down the country and throughout time, generally just let them get on with it and don't take too much notice. Sorry if that offends your sensibilities. And there was another story. What was the other one? The suggestion that if people are embarrassed by their sexuality or if they are struggling with it, they might not go to the doctors because they might feel a bit unwelcome or a bit uncomfortable. So you just put up a little rainbow flag saying, we're cool, and that might encourage them to come, and it might not. But again, I don't the scale of the reaction against something seems to be, to me, much bigger than the original so-called problem. It really does. And then all of the people who are really outraged are saying things like, John, bless him, in Le Mans, about political correctness and all this. I don't remember anyone campaigning to get rid of grid girls at Formula One. Do you? I'm not aware of this sort of mobilised lobby. Now that the decision is being made, I have given it some thought, and I don't really understand what they were doing there in the first place, except to provide a very old-fashioned sense of visual gratification to chiefly men. And there's nothing really wrong with visual gratification, but if a company decides that it feels a little bit old-fashioned, a little bit anachronistic, a little bit like that 1967 poster for Taming of the Shrew that essentially encouraged domestic violence because that's how society felt about men hitting their wives in 1967, then the company moves on. The weirdest thing, and this I think is really dangerous, the weirdest thing is this notion that, it's political correctness gone mad, everyone's getting offended about everything. From where I sit, which is often on the fence on a lot of these issues, but often not, often on the side that would be described as liberal or open-minded or progressive, from where I sit, there seems to be a hell of a lot more complaining and offending and outrage being done by the people who are complaining about other people complaining and being offended and being outraged. And that's why these simple questions sometimes bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. I'm here to defend the presence of women on Formula One grids. OK, cool. Why are they there? I'm not going to answer that question. Well, how can you not answer that question if you're calling in to defend but why are they there? And take the darts, which I have got more experiences of than the Formula One, both on the telly and live. And why on earth have you got young women in glittery bikinis accompanying sort of pastry-faced oldish men in sports casual clothes and penny loafers into a sporting arena? It's just hard to explain. And if you can't explain it, I don't understand how you can defend it until we acknowledge that nobody likes to be told that they're a sad old man. Nobody likes to be told that they're complicit in sexual discrimination or oppression or the patriarchy. Nobody likes to get told any of those things. And when you get rid of something that you never had a problem with, you feel judged. I think I would. But you don't have to. You could just see it as change, as movement. I can't really believe the scale now that we give to stories like this. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, don't give it the scale then. But you can't help it, can you? It's a bit like if there was a pack of rabid dogs barking outside the studio door, would I talk about them? Or would I try and talk about Theresa May's latest embarrassments in China? I don't know, but I can't ignore the rabid dogs, even though I'm no closer to understanding them than I was at 8 o'clock this morning. Let's try a little harder. Nikki's in Folkestone. Nikki, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello,
I didn't have any strong views about this either way, but it's something...
What? How dare you? You've got to have a strong view. Have you not read the news? Grrr.
I know, so I feel like a bit of a traitor to my sex, but it was something I heard this morning and it all sort of dropped into place. It was about one of the grid girls was saying it's my choice to do it. And I just want to address this fallacy of choice, because the choices that are available to women, the role models that they have in society, like politics and media, they've got less choice than men.
Yes, exactly.
Do you see what I'm saying? And like at the President's Club last week, the chances of women getting to that position that the men were in is just, significantly less. And
we're so used to it, I think, is perhaps the problem. And the thing that people, like my earlier caller, sometimes... I don't want to sound rude, but he did struggle to articulate why he felt so strongly about something he couldn't really explain the existence of, because it feels as if, well, it's always been like this. You can't tell me that I've done it wrong. And that's how women end up, like in that 1967 poster for Taming of the Shrew, effectively appealing to women who approve of domestic violence by men against women, because it's always been like that. And if she got... That's it. I'm going to use the word grooming.
Yeah.
It's a society that's been groomed into thinking that this imbalance between the sexes is absolutely fine.
Yeah, so it's part of the wider issue. And of course it is a woman's choice. They can do what they want, but when their role models are, reality stars, getting their buttocks pumped up and they get rewarded for that. And when you turn on the TV and, it's Prime Minister's Question Time, and the majority of the people are white men, what is a woman going to aspire to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's how I see it. I think I made a mistake this morning on Twitter. It was by seeing it from a parental angle, because that makes it sound... It wasn't a massive mistake, but you've got to be very careful on Twitter to leave even a glimpse of stocking, so to speak. But it is simply, here are two 10-year-olds. What is a healthier dream? To dream of being a racing driver or to dream of being an umbrella holder? Mm. And the fact that sticks in some people's craw is because they've never thought of it that way. But she's not... but you can only be an umbrella holder if you're beautiful. That's it, isn't it? What do we want? What do we want to hold up to the younger generation as things that they should aim for? Answer: aim to be an international superstar rather than an umbrella holder.
Yeah, exactly.
But does that mean you have to ban umbrella holders?
Oh, I don't know, James.
Nor do I. But it's a company that's made the decision. I often like to think of turning the question the other way round. and saying, should a private company that makes an enormous profit every year be ordered by the politically incorrect to carry on doing something that it doesn't want to do anymore? See, not normally, it's like Conservatives with a small c would have been opposed to bikinis when they came in because they didn't like the change. It's odd. And now we're going slightly back in the other direction towards not objectifying women, and the same people who would have been cross with the introduction of bikinis on beaches are going to be cross about the removal of grid girls from Formula One. Strange times. Richard's in Cheshire. Richard, how angry are you?
Oh, I'm not angry. I just want to make my opinion, and I thought I'd share my name with you because it's Richard Burton, and you mentioned him earlier.
Richard Burton, congratulations. Were you always? I mean, I don't know how old you are, but yes.
I am 61, so
your whole life.
I was born just as Richard was about to burst onto the...
but he nicked your name. His real name was Jenkins, I believe.
It was indeed. I was named after Sir Richard Burton, the Victorian explorer.
The Arctic explorer. Gosh, exciting.
Exciting.
It is a name, isn't it? It's a name with some weight, Richard Burton. It's not like James O'Brien. It's got some proper clout, Richard. Anyway, we're getting distracted. What did you call in to tell me?
Basically, just a bit of hypocrisy out there. In general, the travel of the way things are happening with the way women are objectified is good because it's getting less and less and less, hopefully.
I thought so. But some people don't see it that way, do they?
Today's young ladies are amazing. I've got young nieces and they are doing so well, and I'm in business and I go around, I visit lots of companies, I'm in sales, and I see ladies at virtually every level now, and it's getting better and better and better. That's fantastic. But what gets my go basically is that you have all the pop world, and you have all the the sisters who are right on and all about women's rights, and then they go out and they display themselves virtually in a pornographic way on a daily basis in the media, and it just, to me, just seems total hypocrisy. You can't have one thing without the other.
Well, isn't it power? I'm not completely clear on this. I'm just responding as you speak, but the women in charge of their own careers have an exercise of choice that feels different in terms of power dynamics to the women who are following men around with umbrellas.
Once they're Beyonce, they can do what they want.
Yeah, but it's getting to be Beyonce, and it's all the people dancing around in the background. But I don't think anyone who's warmly or gently welcoming of the ban upon, of the decision by Liberty Media not to have grid girls anymore is necessarily going to be a staunch defender of Miley Cyrus swinging around in her birthday suit, are they?
Exactly. Well, I just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and it's nuanced.
There's a lot of double standards out there.
You're right, and that's the problem with the binarisation of everything. It ignores nuance, it ignores quibbling. Whataboutery has replaced open thought, I think. Which is the opposite of what Richard was doing. He was thinking. He wasn't just going, what about that? That proves this. He was saying, I like the progress that's being made, but let's not pretend that it's not confusing, because in other areas I can't see any. It's 11:32, and I don't know what to make of it. We could carry on this conversation that seems to me to be quite trivial but utterly engrossing for hours. I suspect colleagues will return to it later in the day. In the great scheme of things, it shouldn't be important at all, but it seems, again, I'm drawn to this weird observation that seems to fly in the face of a lot of what's going on at the moment, that all of the people who are insisting that there's far too much outrage and offence and what they call political correctness out there seem to me, at least, to be a hell of a lot louder and more outraged and more offended than the people that they're outraged with. 14 students turn up at a cafe to complain about colonialism or something. I couldn't even bring myself to find out more. I saw the numbers involved. What's that doing in the national news? It sort of began, you remember when some kids at Oxford wanted to take down a statue of Cecil Rhodes? And you sort of thought, fair enough, they're at the college, I'm not. See how that passes. What does the... Suddenly it's front page news. Everyone's going nuts about it. You've got the rainbow stuff outside GP surgeries to tell people who are still struggling with their sexuality or embarrassed about it that they have nothing to struggle with or be embarrassed about in this particular surgery. But, it's outrageous. And now the decision by a private company that owns the rights to Formula One to do away with something that to many people feels a bit old-fashioned, to many other people doesn't, or if it does, it's harmless and old-fashioned. Just let the company decide what they want to do. But no, it's PC gone mad. It's this, that and the other. And the problem is, for someone like me, and I suspect the majority of people are more like me on this than either of the two extremes, is that if you're 60% on one side, it doesn't really matter anymore, because the people who are 100% on either side are dominating the debate. And if you want to be heard, you've got to adopt the volume and the verbal violence that they employ, which is fine for someone like me. I love it. I do it for a living. But for normal people who don't have a stupid look at me gene like most people in my game do, for normal people, social media is sort of killing conversation. It is, everything's like a game of football now. So on this conversation about so-called grid girls, you're either 100% in favour of them or you're 100% convinced that it's absolutely ridiculous. I completely understand how it's grown up. It's grown up from an era when, you'd sell everything from peanuts to Castrol GTX with a picture of a woman in a bikini. And we don't live in that era anymore. And Formula One has arrived at the conclusion that probably we should move away from this, just as we've moved away from other modes of employing women, not dressed in bikinis anymore, as the first caller John explained. I think they are at the darts, but it's just a question of moving on. Where's the? I guess I'm wondering where all the fury comes from. It does feel to me to be a bit post-Brexit. People thought when they voted for Brexit that everything was going to somehow go back to how it was before, and nothing's really changing, and the changes that are happening look like things are going to be worse than they were before, so we're going to double down on this mythical defence of a past, a non-existent past. Except, I suppose, in the case of objectifying women and using them to sell everything from Spuds to Castrol GTX, it is a past that exists. I want to go back to the days when if you bought the right packet of peanuts in the Dog and Duck, you would unveil a prominent part of a woman's physiognomy. Do you know what? It's the worst thing to do as a radio phone-in host. But I don't know why people care so much about this story. Let's try and find out. Mo's in Monument. Mo, what would you like to say?
Hey, James.
Hey,
Firstly, great fan. I just wanted to say, like you mentioned earlier, it just kind of seems like it's a bit of a old-fashioned approach. I mean, most of no offence meant, but most of the callers coming in seem to be from the older generation. Liberty Media took control of Formula One. I think I'm one of those people that have been following it all my life, but quite young. So, and to us, I just don't think it cares. No one cares. I mean, they're all.
Well, that's clearly not true, is it? People care passionately, and yet, you can't. It's not really fair to use one or two people as brushes with which to tar the whole lobby, but they can't really explain why, except with the perfectly reasonable answer that it's always been like this, and I don't want to feel like I've been implicit in something wrong for the last 25 years, and yet no one's really saying that. They're just saying in the next 25 years, things are going to be different.
Well, and the point is, right, Liberty Media took control of the Formula One from Bernie Ecclestone, who was, he was kind of old school.
Yeah, I think we can go with that.
Right, and he kind of run that the way he wanted to run it, his kind of boys' club. Liberty Media got a different approach. They want to expand the audience, get a new bunch of younger people into the sport. And I think I was reading yesterday that they're the fastest growing sport brand on social media.
Are they really?
And they. Yeah. I mean, I think they started off with a pretty low bar, to be fair. But yeah, they're growing.
Do you know what I think? This is a pet theory of mine. As a father of two young women, two girls, they are growing up in terms of their popular culture influences. They're growing up in the shadow of Katniss Everdeen, Hermione Granger, and Rey out of Star Wars.
Yeah, basically.
And their mum grew up with Princess Leia in a gold bikini being yanked around the place by Jabba the Hutt.
Exactly.
And damsels in distress being rescued by princes. So it seems to me, and I really don't want to offend anyone or upset anyone, it seems to me that the Formula One is moving to the world of Katniss Everdeen and Hermione Granger, and a lot of people uncomfortable with that move are still living in the world of Princess Leia and Sleeping Beauty.
Well, exactly. But just on another point as well, it comes down to the fact that, I mean, when I first read about this whole article, I saw it on BBC front pages of their news.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, really?
Yeah, the BBC should know better. They should leave the lazy provocations to us in the commercial sector, shouldn't they?
Exactly. It seems like there's a bit of the media kind of making this story a bigger thing than it actually is.
Everything has to be a fight.
Really thought
Everything.
about this before this became a news article? Who was really thinking about? What about those girls on the?
Well, do you know? answer that by saying I have found it impossible. Not with Formula One, because it's not a big thing in our house, but the darts, which sadly she's growing out of now. But when she was little, my oldest would actually join in with the "Let's play darts." It's one of the first things she picked up off the telly. I've never been prouder in my life. I can't really explain to her what they're doing there, except men like looking at them, but that probably makes it even worse from her 12-year-old perspective.
Exactly.
I'm glad to hear some sort of sympathy for the relative voice of reason. It's not good radio to say, give me a ring and tell me why you care about something I don't care about. I care about the aspirations that society teaches young people to have. I care about women essentially being taught for the last few decades that they can't aim as high as men. They have been taught that. Some women have aimed high and superseded men. But I'm sorry, I'm going to bore you rigid with the Katniss Everdeen, Hermione Granger analogy. It is almost unthinkable, isn't it, for a woman in her 40s or 50s to look at what popular culture teaches young women today about what they can and could be. Because I tell you now that what young women are being taught today is that they can be the match of any man. Look at politics in Britain. Look at Ruth Davidson. Look at Nicola Sturgeon. Look at outside Britain, Angela Merkel. Remember when Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister in this country, and it felt like, and a lot of traditionalists were unhappy about the fact that she was a woman. I just feel that some people try to stop the wheels from turning, and I'd like to come before 12 o'clock. Good God, where's the morning gone? When we'll kick off Mystery Hour, a better understanding of why the wheels turning is so problematical. When to people like Mo, and to a lesser extent me, it seems utterly silly. Okay, they're not going to have grid girls there anymore. Oh, okay. Next. I'm trying to write something at the moment about political correctness, and it's tough, you know, because I can't see it in the way that often older, not always people do. Maybe it's because I was too busy in the 80s going out and enjoying myself, and for most of the 90s as well, actually. But I never really registered clamorous calls for social change. I look back on it now, and those claims that they'd banned the word blackboard in case it was racist and you weren't allowed to have Christmas. It was all nonsense. Presumably just a little bit before my time. It was all whipped up by the same newspapers for the same reasons. Don't worry about the facts, just focus on the fury. And that now feeds into a perception that whenever anything happens that some people consider to be social progress, other people reach for the political correctness gone mad. Here is a Renault driver, Nico Hulkenberg, responding to the announcement yesterday that Formula One was doing away with grid girls. He said it would be a pity if they took the eye jewellery from the grid. And I think that's brilliant. Because I think now you can pick a side. Women as eye jewellery, or no, actually, not as a career option. Adam's in Walthamstow. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Good to talk to you again. James, I'm actually an ex-Renault Formula One driver as well. Back in 2009, I test drove for the team, and I've sort of raced in all the junior categories right up to Formula One. So I'm pretty well qualified to speak on this subject.
Well, you're pretty well qualified to speak on Formula One. I don't know how qualified you are to speak on feminism.
Maybe not feminism, but I've got a baby daughter due in a few days' time anyway.
Congratulations.
So I'll come on to that in a minute.
Yes.
Thank you. I mean, in terms of the grid girls, I mean, a lot of them are actually aspiring models. I've had plenty of conversations with them from China to Australia, New Zealand, wherever. A lot of them have aspirations to use their looks to make a career. So I don't really see what the problem is there. Secondly, a lot of them actually get, very, very good pay for the day. A lot of them are students studying. They just want to earn a few extra quid.
I can see this defence, and I can see it clearly. But oddly, it's not me that you take that up with, really. It's Formula One, because what you're really saying now is that they shouldn't be free to make a decision like this because you've met some models.
Well, I do think Liberty Media are missing a trick because obviously the grid girls, like Nico's, said in his Twitter post, they do add the element of they are eye candy.
Eye jewellery. Eye jewellery was the phrase.
Eye jewellery, okay, fine.
And that for me is that for me, and of course now what we end up doing as men is defending the right of women to be eye jewellery, whereas the feminist position as I understand it, and my understanding may be meagre, the feminist position would be that it's only because of society's structures that women have ended up thinking being eye jewellery is something they should aspire to. And I don't think we want to raise young women who think that ending up as eye jewellery for men like you is an ambition. A cool ambition. Any more than growing up in 1967, growing up believing that it's okay for your husband to slap you around.
James, say that to Naomi Campbell or Kate Moss. They seem to have done okay out of being eye jewellery. So what's to say that other women can't do the same? Well, no one's
calling for. Okay, well, you asked me a question. I can't answer it if you keep talking.
Sorry.
Okay, so the comparison between grid girls and supermodels is the one that you're making. Because aspiring to be one of the most successful and well-paid women on the planet doesn't seem to me to be the same as aspiring to be an umbrella holder on a Formula One grid.
Yeah, but James, you're comparing chalk and cheese.
No, you are, mate. You're comparing Naomi Campbell to some woman in lederhosen carrying an umbrella around for Nico Rosenberg.
But Naomi Campbell would have had to start somewhere, as anybody.
I think she could have ended up a suit. So, okay, I understand. You're suggesting that if it wasn't for grid girls, there wouldn't be any supermodels?
But they're making... No, I'm not saying that, but they're making a career choice. Nobody's forcing them into it.
And that's what we said about society defining the choices. That bit was pretty clear. The idea is that aspiring to be eye jewellery for men like you is something that should be either encouraged or discouraged. I would discourage it. Formula One agree with me. Aspiring to be a supermodel seems to me to be rather different. And you could, I suppose... No,
it's not, because it's the same thing, James. It's still being eye jewellery. For men,
it's about power as well, isn't it?
Serving and titillating, whatever you were saying.
It's about power, because supermodels are selling clothes to women.
Really.
Supermodels are selling clothes to women. What are grid girls selling?
Well, they're adding the element of glamour and looking beautiful to that sporting environment.
Yes, so they're not like supermodels at all.
I don't think it's good or bad.
You did a minute ago. You didn't just say PC gone mad with a straight face, did you?
Well, James, look, I'm talking because I'm saying it from the perspective that I've actually met them and spoken to them and had actually quite in-depth conversation with them.
That's absolutely great, but let's focus on the words that you use. What does political correctness mean?
Girls in China, but all over the place.
I heard you the first time. What does political correctness mean?
Well, this is pro-feminist agenda, really, that seems to be forced upon everybody.
What does feminist mean?
Well, James, you're attacking me, right?
I'm asking you questions about the words you've just used, so you can pick either political correctness or feminist and tell me what you understand those words to mean.
Well, there should be elements of political correctness, I agree.
What does it mean?
In this case, it's some...
What do you mean when you use that phrase?
Trying to make everybody totally equal, which sadly in society will never ever
How
happen.
on earth is getting rid of grid girls trying to make everybody completely equal?
Yeah, but James, men and women, they're different. You can't say everybody has to be homogenous.
Nobody has, Adam. Somebody has said, what does political correctness mean?
Well, you're asking me to define something that's in the dictionary, James.
No, I'm asking you to define the phrase you just used. It's not really unkind of me. Or we can, if you're not comfortable telling me what you meant when you said political correctness gone mad, you could tell me what you meant when you said feminist, as a sounding negative.
Well, I do think there is that element to do with this decision that Liberty Media have taken. Like I say, it's a pretty trivial subject, but I think it's representative of what's happening in society.
So no. What does feminist mean when you use it like that? When you say it's a pro-feminist thing, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's this notion that women are not equal to men in society. I think in many ways women actually have more rights than men.
What about on the Formula One grid? How many men are employed?
I've had a conversation with Maria de Villota. She's passed away, unfortunately. She was a Formula One driver. Susie Stubbart, she was a Formula One driver.
That's two people.
Women aren't given opportunities to be as equal to the men in a sport such as Formula One.
I can,
I
Adam.
agree, it's predominantly...
I can. But you just said it yourself. Actually, I'll just be quiet. You're right. You're arguing with yourself now. It's quite fun.
I'm not.
You are.
Okay, James.
Any more on what political correctness means?
James, you're reverting back to the same.
I'm just asking you
same
to define a phrase that you used, because whenever I ask people what they mean by that, they fall apart. And I don't mean to be rude, although sometimes I enjoy pointing out people's peculiar positions. I don't hold you responsible for it, because how many times, Adam, would you estimate you've heard the phrase PC gone mad?
Loads of times.
And how many times have you stopped to wonder what it means?
Well, I suppose it defines an underlying sentiment. Maybe it's not the right definition to use. But
so next time you hear it, take a moment and wonder what it means.
Okay.
That's all I'm doing. Because it seems to me to mean, in your mouth, very, very little.
What would you define the sentiment as, then?
Well, I don't know what sentiment you think you're describing with the words that you can't define.
The frustration that people
feel that we're putting too much effort into promoting equality.
When there is, in fact, plenty of equality in society.
Says a man.
James. Would I feel that my daughter has any less equality than my son?
Well, let's wait until she's born. Let's wait until she's born, okay? And then maybe count the FTSE 100s, count the Formula One drivers, count the pretty much any profession you want, except, as you pointed out yourself with your reference to supermodels, the professions that depend almost entirely upon physical attributes. And then get back to me and tell me whether or not you feel your daughter has the same opportunities as your son. And then after we've done that, and I wish you all the very best for her imminent birth, we can see whether she's got a better idea of what political correctness means than you and every other person I have ever spoken to who uses it casually and comfortably as a pejorative without knowing what it means. Because I'll tell you what it means. It means stop trying to be nice to each other.